Are you looking for a new way to get and stay healthy? Well, I put together a roadmap just for you, designed to help you feel good and stay sane through the integration of yoga, meditation, digestive health, whole food nutrition, and herbal medicine. It's also an overview of some of the progressive, multidimensional approaches that I've come to use with my one-on-one clients to help them connect to the body's innate wisdom in order to heal from chronic pain, exhaustion, and even trauma. So I can't wait for you to read this. So go to elissafinning.com now to get your hands on this 16-page guide today, or check out the show notes for the link. Welcome to the Wild Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Elissa Finning, and this is your space to learn more about the importance of slowing down, taking care of yourself, and the mind-body connection. And most importantly, how to reclaim your health by listening to your body's innate wisdom and reconnecting with the earth. So, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, you know I'm adamant about sharing the importance of connecting to the body in order to know yourself. Why? Well, one reason is that the body can hold unprocessed trauma in so many different ways. But it's also important to honor the power of energy and the energetic layer of the body. And since there's growing evidence showing that physical pain and ailments are manifestations of these more invisible energetic and emotional states, it's time to pay attention. So my guest today, Dr. Lissette Alvarez Holland, shares her journey of over 25 years that stemmed from clinical practice as a doctor of physical therapy, specializing in integrative women's health, to reintroducing life coaching and intuitive health into aspects of pain, movement therapies, and preventative care for all ages, and serves as a mentor now for other women, including myself, in the healing arts wanting to build business brands that do the same. Today, she shares with us the intertwining of mind and body, including the endocrine system, and why every woman also needs to be in touch with her energy field. Be sure to jump on my Instagram page for a chance to win a one-on-one life coaching call to start you off on an energetic blueprint for becoming the CEO of your life, along with a free copy of Dr. Aviva Rome's Adrenal Thyroid Revolution. Now let's dive in. Well, thanks, Lissette, for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I always like to start by sharing with our audience, like, what's your story? Because like a lot of people I've interviewed, but not everybody, your story is unique, especially integrating a Western medical model and more the Eastern and spiritual, the holistic side, or complementary or alternative, is often what it's called. So I always like to know, because sometimes people can really relate to your story or a part of your story and where they are on the path. So if you'd be willing to share.
Yes, thank you so much. It's, as you were saying, that's a good question, right? Because we all have our origin stories. And as you were speaking, right, you're saying, is it alternative? Is it complementary? Is it Eastern? Is it this? Is it that? Is it yoga? Is it, my modality of Eastern choice was yoga and getting into the sciences of that. But that was part of it. I started blending these together back in like 2001, 2002. I took I was into the prenatal route. And when I first opened up Belly Guru in 2005, it really was out of a desperation of having a way to not sacrifice my career fulfillment with not sacrificing my mommy fulfillment. We moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina from New York because it was just so expensive there, and I could just see myself getting on the whole, it was all linear grind, it was all hustle and bustle. I mean, it's, New York state of mind, which is great for entrepreneurism, but not so much for like a healthy, balanced woman. And I already had this was 2 kids in. I had a lot of postpartum depression with my first. Mm-hmm. I had some hormone stuff. I mean, I still don't have my eyebrows after my second. And, I just saw it. I didn't even really understand, and I wasn't into more than the more physical fitness type yoga. And I was just getting into the whole big, I already had a sound spirituality, I think, but I wasn't into, I was trying to find my teachers and all of that.
Sure.
So really the evolution of Belly Guru was sort of like my journey. And as I brought in more and more yoga, I started to really realize, the story of a woman and our bodies, and my own body being like this microcosm of the whole macrocosm, even more so woman than man. And so Belly Guru evolved to be working with women through transition. I evolved to be working more through people with change and brought in a lot more life coaching. Mm-hmm. And so lo and behold, I started out as an athletic trainer in ortho sports medicine my first 10 years. And now I'm like, if anything, it's life coaching. I just find spirit, I think a life without spirit, being inspired, mm-hmm. having some sort of connection other than the worldly things, is a very unhappy, long, tiring one. Mm-hmm. And so, that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I just sort of keep evolving. I'm very entrepreneur minded, so I probably could have just had 10 different companies, but I somehow found a way to put them all under the same theme of women's empowerment and personal development, and that being what I found to be what health was, which was coming from the Eastern model. As I learned more from that, I just kind of took that into the Western model. One thing that made me a little different than maybe some other people is I never abandoned the Western model. I never said, now I'm a yoga therapist. I actually always was me. Mm-hmm. And I was going to find a way for the Western minds to accept the Eastern philosophies mm-hmm. in care. Mm-hmm. And thank God, finally, right? So I started that journey 2002, 2003. I'm here in 2005 opening my company. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, around 2013, 14, we started having this wonderful thing called functional medicine people come up.
Yeah.
And so that whole thing with looking at the root and going into lifestyle medicine and the blending up of epigenetics, suddenly I had Western words mm-hmm. to use for Eastern philosophies.
Yes.
And that's really where I sit. I really do talk I'm not necessarily talking chakras. Mm-hmm. I'm talking neuroendocrine, mm-hmm. immunology.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, I think that's important because sometimes, talking about just such, what can seem like esoteric words like chakras and that sort of stuff can turn people off. Because they're not, they haven't been open to it. Because even with yoga, it's a journey. Like you can go so deep in it, as you know.
Right.
And many people are just going to the physical, and it makes them feel better. And then somehow they might dive deeper, but not always. So I think it is good to meet people where they are and talk in those terms that are relatable, because then you're speaking to more people and really, I think, helping in different ways. But let's talk about the neuroendocrine system, or because I've even worked with allergy elimination, and it's what's really worked is that whole, what is it, psycho,
right, biopsychosocial,
the whole thing, which is what yoga therapy is, but not a lot of people understand what that is either. Like, it's the biopsychosocial, spiritual, that sort of stuff, which includes the spiritual layer, which is so important, as we discussed. But talking from that more, which you just mentioned, the neuroendocrine, psycho,
right.
whatever, bio, whatever, big long word. But talking about what is that? Why is it so important? And then, of course, we'll get into the energetics of it as well for women.
Yeah, great, thank you. Well, here's the deal. Most of us are not really taught, or at least, I never went to school outside of America, so I can just say from my American education, we're taught the structures, mm-hmm. right? And then even going into health schools, we're taught the performance, the anatomy and the physiology. Mm-hmm. And so, neurology is this special branch. And, it deals primarily with the disorders of the central nervous system, mm-hmm. not even the peripheral. So when I say central, it's the spinal cord and the brain. It's not really too concerned with your ulnar nerve or your this or that. If you got a problem with that, you're probably going to a physical therapist or somebody else or something like that. Neurophysiology came in, which is not the same thing, and said, hey, well, there's this connection. There's this, like, something going on where there's not just a feedback from the brain to the body. There is actually communication from the body setting up the brain and going from there. And so that was a union of kind of both neurology and physiology. And then they realized, hey, there's this endocrinology. That's the problem in the West, the allopath. I'm going to say allopathic model is it was just kind of very mechanistic. And so, this is coming up during the time of like Ford industrialization on let's just break up the pieces and put the pieces together on the assembly line. So it's very much still mindset like that. So it broke up the human body, and we've got this endocrine system. And for a very long time, I would say we are even still struggling because of some other key things like energetics we don't understand is what the endocrine system actually is the manifested form of. We didn't really realize there's actually the endocrine system is probably a part of the neurological system. It's, it's its own thing of these glands, these conglomerates, but they're organs that sort of really respond to this chemistry, this biochemistry coming in, and that needs circulation, and that's also the nervous system, telling it what to do. And so that, I would say probably, and I don't quote me on the years, but probably I started seeing in terms of my education as a women's health coach and functional medicine and all of that, this concept of neuroimmunology and neuroendocrine immunology, meaning that the inflammatory response of the body was happening at the cellular levels, not necessarily, just because well, let me say it the other way. It was happening at the brain or central level just as much as at the cellular level. So we had to sort of start looking at both. And so all of a sudden, all of these mad woman menopause, crazy, her going crazy, or a pubescent teen, anger, craziness of testosterone and things like that, started making more sense. Why do we have this PMS? Why do we have this PMDD? These things are, premenstrual dysmorphia, these really pregnancy, going off, acting in ways that person never would have, maybe going to jail for it. We started realizing there was an interconnection that we really needed to understand. Now, for how far we are in that, that's a different story, because there's still a holding on in the Western model to be so segmental, to treat, or, by surgery, pharmacology, or, some sort of, now they're getting a little bit into lifestyle, but they still don't know how to coach you. What do we do to see if we can tap into the system as opposed to take it over, by something else. So that's really what it is. And, that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, and so a lot of our listeners can relate to these feelings of, okay, maybe it was pinpointed as an endocrine issue, a thyroid issue, for example, or an adrenal issue, or, that sort of stuff. And those are just examples. But it's still a lot of times just pinpointed as it's just this one gland, and really there's more than that. And so I think the point you may be trying to get across to the world and sharing your wisdom with the world is that, and of course the researchers and scientists who kind of realize this is all happening and it's working both ways, which is helpful to validate some of the things that, other people may have known, whatever, philosophy that has been, just like yoga is now more evidence-based because people are researching it and showing some evidence, which is nice because then it gets accepted in the mainstream. Right. So it's really good for that. But the whole point of it can be more than just the dysfunction of one gland. There's many layers physically, and with the structures of the whole body, including the nervous system, the brain, that sort of stuff. And also that energetic layer, which isn't necessarily researched and discovered and accepted as much in the Western world or in the allopathic medicine world. So let's talk about energetics and why that's so important, because prior to us recording, I talked about how that was so helpful for me making huge shifts in my life, is really accessing the energetic layer and clearing some of the heavy energies or whatever that may have still existed from childhood, that sort of stuff. That was really helpful in me moving forward. So what is that?
Well, it kind of baffles my mind, because the way I came in, I was very, logic-based studying. Like, I remember I was one of those kids that was like, Mom, why is the grass green? Mm-hmm. Tell me why the grass is green. Like, other kids might not really care. They just take it for fact. Grass is green, sky is blue. Mm-hmm. I was asking those questions. And so that's how I got into just even understanding, like, we're the 5 elements. It's not so hard and foreign for me to understand that. Well, if we're all these elements that fell from the stars, mm-hmm. then we're probably, similar in some way to the universe. Like, it seems like a connection. So energetics, I don't know why it's so hard for us to comprehend and take, as the norm when somebody comes into the room who's angry or very depressed or complaining or very happy, or when you see a baby, you just tend to smile. The baby didn't make you smile. There's like we seem to understand, when somebody's kind of like an uncomfortable energy or when we're uncomfortable, but then we will discount this whole system of saying, well, here's the logic, which is more in the Eastern. Cells have energy. They literally, the whole entire reason you breathe is to break up the energy in the mitochondria of your cell. Like, the whole reason for oxygen for us is to do this cellular energetic reaction, this biochemical, to release energy. Mm-hmm. Vitality is kind of your youth and your prosperity and your ability to function. Maybe there's something to this body being actually an energetic thing that is contained for us, as opposed to a dog or a cat in this form, and that women and men are different, packages, but they obviously have a chemistry, right? It's not just what we release, but in many ways it is, right? We have a physiology, we have chemicals that are released when we're looking at our phone too much, where, it's like this dopamine release. We're obviously interacting with the world. We obviously need sun, which is radiation energy, but why do we have that? So I'm not, for me, it's very difficult to understand why such the big gap. And it's mainly because we rely here in the West with only crediting what our eyes, one organ, can see. Mm-hmm. And we don't even believe what we taste sometimes, right? We're eating mindless stuff, but we're addicted to the feeling after. And even though we're like, I don't even like this if I actually thought about it. I just want the feeling after. Mm-hmm. Right? We'll like sleep with somebody. I don't even like this person, but I just want the orgasm or something, right? Like it's amazing how much our habits get hijacked for the hit. Mm-hmm. And so that we don't have the technology yet, but we very much do see. It's just that since we can't measure it, we discount it.
Yes.
Here in the West. So it's very unfortunate. Whereas in the Eastern model, what I really loved about yoga therapy and how I saw it could merge the mind and the body, which is how I always worked, without me having to go become a psychologist on the side, was that it appreciated that there was this interconnect, it appreciated us being energetic beings. And it was, even though it had an energetic anatomy, which is these, energy lines and things we may study, it wasn't hell-bent on the fact that, fixing this. I mean, it shouldn't be. Some people are. They're like, I'm going to go fix second chakra, and it's going to suddenly, fix everything. it was more about giving you systems to tap into, or giving you techniques to tap into tuning up and tuning in, and appreciated the fact you are made for this. Whereas obviously the Western model sort of says the doctor knows what's best for you. Whatever you have to say and you think you know about your body for the past 40 years probably doesn't mean much, because you didn't go get the same degree as me on the wall. And, you know, oh, that medicine isn't fixing you and making you happy. Let me increase the dose. And it's kind of like, well, let's kind of make sure we're on the right thing. So, you know, and some of this is the non-belief in how I feel. And honestly, emotions, what are emotions? Emotions are vibrations, cellular vibrations, little connections in our brain, little sparks that are perceived in a certain way. They're vibrations, they're frequencies. We call them emotions. This frequency I'm feeling right now is anger. This frequency, and for some people who are not psychosocially developed, emotional intelligence developed, they feel excitement and they think it's anxiety. Right?
Yeah.
And so their brain, their body reacts, their endocrine system reacts and pumps out chemicals thinking I'm anxious when I'm just kind of excited and happy.
Well, yeah, you know, a lot of people they're not in tune at all, which is why I love yoga therapy. Just for exactly what you said. It is a way to start to tune in and develop some awareness into your body, into your emotions, into that energetic field, that sort of stuff. And even into a spiritual field of, you know, non-denominational. It's just that universal sort of thing, which I think is important. I do not do energetic stuff except besides what I do with the yoga therapy and practices, that sort of stuff. I'm not an energy therapist or practice energy medicine in a sense. But I notice it a lot with, I'm very sensitive and in tune with it, especially when it comes where I really picked it up at first, before I kind of saw it between humans, I guess. And really knowing it for myself was with animals. And
perfect example.
And also with, I've been noticing lately, and really not so much noticing, but like just paying more attention to it, of how my dog mirrors me and how my baby mirrors me. You know, because I know I've worked with horses and stuff like that, and just how they'll mirror you, or you pick the same vibration. You know, if you end up with, I always end up with the ornery horses for some reason, but you know, that sort of stuff. And it's very interesting. And I think that's important for people to realize, you know, like there's not an issue with your child always, or your pet. It may be a complete reflection of you, because there's an energetic exchange. And noticing that. So you were talking about getting in tune with natural cycles from childhood. I'm interested in what you mean by that.
Well, one of the ways I would work with women was if they were speaking to me. I have a philosophy. I work in I call it my 5 realms of well-being. And so there's physical and social, psychosocial, energetics, and dharma, your sense of purpose, and then the mental. So I do separate these things. So function of my brain, this and that. But then on top of that, I layer sort of their story. And I very much believe the body is a product of the energy and the mind, and our body's never broken. I mean, yes, if you get in a car accident and your arm gets broken, and you know, when the structural integrity is sacrificed, yes, that's when you're broken. When you just no longer produce a certain hormone or chemical, yes, there's something that's definitely needs to be supplemented. But for the most part, I believe it's a miscommunication. And if you look at trauma studies and you look, you know, ACE scores and all of these things, you know, a lot of our adulting is us working out our childhood, and it doesn't necessarily always, you know, like the stories that we tell ourselves, if people are not communicating to us, sometimes make it even more traumatic than it had to be. And sometimes we're in situations where it was very traumatic and we didn't have the developmental or even the experience of just life enough to, like, you know, make it less than just survivalist, right? In it. Sometimes we'll carry down those mental paradigms with us and it will tell us a story. So for example, if I just perceive myself as a victim in life to whatever resistance, don't get a job, don't get a date, don't, you know, now I get cancer, you know, now I have, if I'm in victimization, yes, I'm not disqualifying that, but I personally can never take someone to the place of feeling whole and healed if they decide I am a victim. No matter where I go, no matter what happens to me, I am a victim here. The universe is not helpful and has my back. The universe is against me. This is not a place of peace that some people are at war in. This is a place of war that I don't understand why the hell anybody can feel peace in. So that's kind of, I feel, and I just worked with enough women and I have an appreciation of my own story that I started kind of, you know, experimenting of going back in their history a little bit to like how they perceived themselves just in that kind of way. Like, are they feeling like the victor or the victim? Because I have to approach that differently. And I learned a little too late that I am best, just even working for my own energy and my own health and to bring them the best, if I'm not working with victims. There's places for them and I want them to have help. But I know I'm my best when they see and they just need to then connect with, you know, that they might not be over those thought patterns, but they're open to the fact that they do have them.
Yes, because, and we talked about this a little bit and totally makes sense because, and I agreed with you, like in my practice, I saw that too. And you actually kind of enlightened me with that little like twist. And it was like, yeah, I knew like, people usually tend to go to the extreme of, especially because now what the effects of trauma are more well known. But then people will either completely act like they're not affected by what's happened to them. They'll go to and not acknowledge it. I've seen both extremes, and I'm sure you have too. Or that's their identity. And so that's where that victim is.
Right.
And I've seen, you know, I've had an array of clients for, both into the spectrum and in between as well. And I remember working with one woman who I was surprised she even wanted to work with me. And now after working together for a few months, she appreciated it, but she was in that mentality. And it was hard for me to get through to her at all.
It's hard. And I think I brought in yoga because my dad suffered from chronic pain. And I say suffered, it was a, you know, mind level. I think I knew even before I was a athletic trainer and I saw obviously sports performance is all in the mind. I mean, everybody's lifting the same weights in the room, you know, some people make it to the Olympics and some people don't. And I knew that. And I just said to myself, why is it different when somebody has a stroke? Why are we not approaching the same thing? You know, why is the sport not pregnancy? Why are we not doing this? So I think I brought in the yoga, not only to give me a way to be mind body, but for the person for me, like you said, to be able to work with these people where they were. It just was hard for me because I no longer believed in just going through the motions.
Sure, I completely understand.
But I do see the value in that. And when you spoke before about I'm not an energy worker, I actually believe everybody who works with movement, with breath, with, you know, talking with relationships and interactions with people, I think all of that is everything is energy.
Well, that's true. I guess
but I just don't think, right. It's just like, you don't want to necessarily, like, you need the experience. And this is where I will say a lot of yoga therapists, yoga teachers, I think there becomes a point where you better respect the power of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And just because you go to a weekend course on, chakra opening up, the low back and the sacrum for back relief, or you better know and respect there may be some reasons they were holding their stress there.
Mm-hmm.
There may be, I can tell you as a pelvic floor therapist that I found plenty of repressed sexual abuses,
Mm-hmm.
chronic back pain, chronic low back pain.
Mm-hmm.
And they did not make that connection. Even as we were working,
Mm-hmm.
they weren't necessarily telling me that history. That's not for me to open that Pandora's box.
Sure.
I shouldn't be opening up that sacral chakra on that person, because I can see in my treatment, they're not ready to go there. Not that I didn't coach and lead and see if they were open to or offer if they said stuff, but I could see where they were at. And at that level,
Mm-hmm.
that level of knowing when it's your box or when it's somebody else's to be opening it up with them,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I think some people get into trouble if they don't respect the power of the energetics. And it does concern me that people are not necessarily trained in that, even in yoga therapy programs.
True.
Even in some yoga therapy programs, that the deep psychosocial
Mm-hmm.
part, the deep neuroendocrine immunology sciences, to see where disease crosses over mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all can coach probably mindset or life to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
as long as we're understanding our limits with what we know and what we don't know.
Yes.
But you need to understand that there's definitely connection. Like, you need to really honor the connections between the energy, the mind, the body,
Mm-hmm.
and how that sort of comes from source down into us.
Yeah.
And up out of us too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I completely agree with that, because I felt like I was, well, I am, I'm not doing one-on-ones right now, but well trained with my experience as a yoga therapist in understanding, like, not ready to go there, or like that sort of stuff, because some people aren't. And that one, working with the pelvic bowl, even though that was the pattern I saw over and over again, and why I like to share that, you have to ease into that, because there is a lot of, work through some of my, I'm still continuing. Right now I'm going to a pelvic
Mm-hmm.
therapist because pregnancy brought up
Mm-hmm.
things for
Right.
me. And so we're working on that. And we haven't even done internal work. We're working on, just around the hips right now. And yesterday I went to the chiropractor to release both psoas, I guess. And that was really, really, I yelled, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
Because I was like, I knew it was, but I needed to finally just go and get some things taken care of. And it was a reflection of how much I was holding on. I knew it, but then your body goes, yeah, you were really holding on. But that's kind of a tangent into what I'm doing right now. But I know just from yoga trainings and yoga therapy trainings, that does get missed. And then people think, oh, I can go heal someone. Look, I have this little information, but it's really sometimes only this much. Like, we're on Zoom, so you can see my hands, but I think all the listeners can't.
Yeah,
So it's really small, and people do have to be careful with that, because there is a lot going on.
And I think we appreciate it in the physical sense, right? Mm-hmm. We wouldn't just lay somebody down and do an internal.
Yeah.
Right? But then we don't, but then we go and we lay somebody down in Savasana and go and, eviscerate them. Sometimes not realizing, so there's just great power. So I do understand, tapping into that. And also too, I think that what you mentioned, pregnancy brought up, when these things change in people, and we're teaching I just think all these encounters are energetic bowls, like you're saying. And even on the Western model, see, that's where they fail, because they're just realizing, this is a relationship. Mm-hmm. All relationships are lessons, right? By A Course in Miracles kind of philosophy, every single relationship, it really wasn't here to give you this guy or gal or kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually all a part of the lessons to be learned. And even that, right, in the intimacy of what do I do with my body? What do I do with my mind? Maybe working with people who are working in yoga, you even get into the soul and spirituality. And also, let me clear up spirituality not being this sort of esoteric thing. Spirituality is a study of self. It's a very deep study of self. And so right when you understand that, you realize, oh, I can see where it goes into the psychology. I can see where it goes into the biology. I can see where it goes into, dealing with life change and things like that, or socioeconomics, or everything else, the environment. It's really not this. It's been obviously compartmentalized into religions, which do have rules of engagement. But in and of itself, if more people were spiritual, truly spiritual, they would be studying the self the same way they're studying, what's the best stock option to take in the next 10 years.
Sure, exactly. So what kind of advice, just in general, because we're on a podcast, do you have for women in how to, maybe this is all new for them, tapping into the study of self, tapping into the energetics, listening, because the part of that energetics is intuition, listening to that gut feeling or, whatnot. And starting to do that and paying attention, because I talked in a lot of podcasts and I talk with women a lot about, that pain. I remember talking to someone like, that pain in your shoulder is not just in your shoulder. And my question is always, what happened when that started? What was going on in your life? So like starting to connect the dots in a sense. And that's what I felt like I did in my practice. But what advice do you have for women to tune in and start kind of going there? I mean, besides listening to my podcast, of course, but
of course, please just keep listening to this. You'll be fine. I think we need to just honor, and it's not just women, like everyone, like the honoring of like I just said, self, right? Study of self. Because like, how will you know when what you're sensing is yours or somebody else's stuff that they threw up on you, that you got conditioned in, like these belief systems, right? Like, how do we ever get out of belief systems by choice? Because that's really, I feel like, right? Isn't that kind of like what growing up is about? It's being able to make choices and decisions. And how will you ever know whether you're trusting yourself or you're just listening to the rules? If you don't understand you versus, and that's one of the developmental things when we have puberty. That's kind of the first time we're sort of really rebelling against the norms to test that. So it's like natural, you can't be a mother upset because your kid don't want to hang out with you anymore. They're trying to find their individuality. And the same thing when they go off and, at every level, that's part of the journey of mothering. That's a blessing in disguise, because you're kind of going through it the whole time, from them going to kindergarten to whatever. So at the end, hopefully you're there as this woman that's like, I've studied myself for whatever years, but there's, so I would say, like, take that opportunity. If you're somebody who's kind of at the beginning of the road and you are a mother and you say, I'm too busy for this to take the time to meditate or to exercise, well, then use your mothering as a yoga and look at your reaction. Like, are you upset your child doesn't need you 24/7 when you've been breastfeeding and they don't want to feed on you and they seem to be pulling away? Like, is this your problem, or is this, don't go be like, oh, my kid's not going to be healthy or whatever, like, making the excuse, right? Like, notice yourself, and in that way you'll have the study of self. Then it's like, notice yourself, like, again, let your relationships be lessons. And when things don't work out in them, let that be like, what did you learn from that? Sort of make life a life school. And then when you're doing that, I think you'll start realizing, I do have time. I wasn't prioritizing it. Like everybody has the same amount of time. It's how we perceive it. Like, if I have 10 minutes, and when you're younger, I'm sure you're dealing with this now with your daughter, like 10 minutes of them sleeping, you're like, yes, like I can do so much. Meanwhile, maybe later on it'll feel like, or at a different time of the day, it'll feel like, oh my God, I just went to the bathroom. That's all I had time for. So that's really the advice I would usually like. It's not always this big orchestrated new thing I have to do.
Sure.
It's let's kind of get better and more efficient with the things that I do find time for. Let me eat a little bit better. Not necessarily like how many calories, but like, am I actually getting nutrition? I can't tell you how many women, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself, where they're starving themselves, not because of weight, but like they're on some certain thing thinking they're being healthy, but like they're still hungry. So eat.
Yes. Well, that actually,
you're not listening.
Yes. So one of the mutual books that we both love is, you had mentioned it in one of our conversations, The Adrenal Thyroid Revolution,
right?
By Viva Rome. That I love because it's like she captures everything I believe in, which I follow her anyway. But and so it's like eat, and she talks about those things, and
because really it all comes back to that book is about everything is energy. Because your adrenal, thyroid, and hypothalamus, and that brain gut connection, that brain adrenals, the brain thyroid, the adrenal thyroid, all of that in a symphony. That symphony, that dance is a yoga. That dance is, to some extent, our reactions to the world. That is, she's encapsulated that neuroendocrine and even immunology to some extent. Sometimes you're anxious because there is something going on. And your inside knows it. Sometimes it's not, here's me being anxious again, let me go meditate. No, listen. Maybe you need to listen and say, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, that's actually another key point, because a lot of people don't listen, and even, as a new mom, I still try to make time. It's sometimes challenging, but try to listen. And that may be after she goes to sleep or something like that. And I might tune in, but I've done a lot of practices, so that's easier for me to drop into, of course. But just tuning in, why does this hurt? Why do I feel this way? That sort of stuff. One of my favorite practices of tuning in is yoga nidra meditation, of course. But there are other ways, and
it's breath, just breathing.
Yep.
Just breathing.
And just seeing where it is and that sort of stuff.
I would say a really good one is every time you pick up your phone, take 2 full breath cycles before you're allowed to look at the phone. If you're going to be giving yourself rules, that's a nice rule.
That is a nice rule. I just try to hide my phone in the morning because it can become quite addicting. It's great, actually. It's great for helping run my business when I can't be on a laptop or, that sort of stuff. But it's amazing how distracting and addicting it can be. So
it's made that way.
Yeah.
It's made to sell.
For sure. And, it's helpful, but I just put it away because I could go into a whole big tangent about kids and phones and that sort of stuff. And I don't want my daughter raised with a phone or with a mom who's always on the phone. So I try to be.
It's hard work. It really is. You can't keep them out from what's going to be outside, but you can definitely show them what the boundaries are. Somebody's got to show them what the boundaries are, and then they can move. And then you need to be okay with them deciding they have their own boundaries.
Yes, because they will. We're going through this with my niece now, who's a teenager, and
it's part of it.
Yes, and so now, for a while, she didn't want to talk to me, and just accepted it. And I said, "I'll be here."
Well, usually, again, that's an energetic thing, right? So that's another kind of tidbit is like, our glands are these wonderful things that are kind of monitoring the energetics. I believe, what the tone of things. I'll say it that way. The tone of what's going on inside, but also outside. And relationships are kind of like that, and they can adapt and they can affect our organs. So it really is kind of like this way that we really do understand. It's like, who's around you, and sometimes that's just it. Sometimes that's the way that you tune in. Is that you sort of say, I need to leave the situation, or I need to engage. I need to force myself to figure out a way to be present, but in a way that's uncomfortable. To make discomfort comfortable, kind of like a yoga pose, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's, I joke with my mom because my parents have been married 41 years. And And, to be with someone that long,
Yeah.
you have to kind of adapt sometimes, or the dynamic gets created and stuff like that. And I always joke with her that her sinus issues are because of my father.
Congestion.
But I also told her, I said, but you can only like do things to like change yourself. You can't make him change in any way. But you could change the dynamic by, and she already has in different ways, by actually learning more about herself and growing in different ways. And but it's just kind of funny that, and we joke about that, and she's starting to realize, well, that might be true.
Well, they always say like you turn in, like the people like turn into their pets, or like there's right? That's an energetic sort of,
yes.
It's a learning. I mean, again, if we can kind of take it out of the esoteric and just understand, all we're saying is that we react and we interact with each other by something that we cannot see, by this omnipotent beingness, this soup that we're kind of all in. When the full moon's out, they will tell you people are more in the emergency room. People are more put in jail. I mean, we obviously attune to things. We need to stop denying it. We need to start allowing everybody to study it. And we need to acknowledge that it's okay if we don't see it, we feel it. But it's a whole nother episode getting into why we swallow our feelings and hide our feelings and all of that. But that's really what it's about. That's why energetics is so hard to get into the mainstream. It's that we are a culture, at least here in America, other Western cultures, of like being this sort of like on show, on display kind of person, not necessarily the authentic person. Even our authentic people are kind of conglomerates of what we saw somebody else, because we don't know that self. And back to that sort of self thing. And I think the endocrine system is a big reminder of these little subtle things. You really can't see these things happening. It's not like we really see neuroepinephrine with, we know the chemistry and we see it in the blood. We have to get it in the blood, right? We need it through the blood. We don't necessarily see it on its own.
Yeah, of course. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and sharing more about this from both, an allopathic side and, more of this, I hate to use the word alternative, but, holistic, like universal side, and showing that there's just different words. There's just different ways to talk about that. But more and more we're getting to where Western medicine is showing that all of this exists. We're just getting the words into the mainstream, and reminding women and everyone, but I mostly work with women, and I think mostly women listen to the podcast, but reminding everyone that, we have that ability to tune in. We have that ability to, to sense and stop rationalizing or dismissing or shoving down, like we might have another conversation about, that sort of stuff. And we could start doing that now. And there's different tools and tactics, or it can be very simple in daily practices. And so I appreciate you sharing all of that and being on, Lissette.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was great. I love the work you're doing. Thank you for doing it.
Great. Thank you. So, I want to hear from you. What did you think of today's topic? Direct message me on Instagram or Facebook, or better yet, join the Wild Wisdom Collective, my free Facebook group, and chime in on the discussion. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and insight. And if you love what you're hearing, please take a moment to click the button on your smartphone to subscribe. Or, better yet, write a review and tell me why you love tuning in. And maybe you'll be featured in our listener spotlight on a future episode. I cannot wait to see you again, same time, same place next week. Wild blessings.